Welcome, I'm Anthony Underwood, and this is Greetings from Appalachia. On this show, we have an incredible guest for you. West Virginia and Appalachia native Stephen Smith, who is currently the co-chair of West Virginia Can't Wait, a movement to build a people's government in the Mountain State. Since 2018, West Virginia Can't Wait has recruited, trained, and supported 110 pro-labor, no corporate cash candidates for office, including Stephen's run for West Virginia governor in 2020. But first, Appalachia is a diverse place. It's a point we make here on this show all the time. One of the ways in which we're so diverse are the religious practices and heritage that you can find throughout the region. We are usually seen as part of the Bible Belt, and there are many places in Appalachia that would qualify as being part of that theoretical location. But there are also a very large number of broad religious communities and practices here in the region, including many people who reject religion completely and live their lives as secular human beings. One of the most famous religious communities in Appalachia and outside of it are the Amish. Like many people who live within easy drive of Amish country, I and my family have taken advantage of the Amish reputation for fine detail, hard work, and incredible food. But there are more complicated aspects to the Amish than beautiful furniture, their work ethic, and great cheeses and jams. The Amish, especially in Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, have become notorious for puppy mills. In fact, the latest report from the Humane Society of the top 100 most abusive and worst puppy mill operations, 14 sit squarely in Appalachia, most concentrations of Amish communities in Ohio, specifically in Holmes and Tuscarawas counties. These puppy mills, especially those run by the Amish, are seen as livestock. They will spend their entire life in the close and difficult confines of a wire cage, only let out when it's time to breed, often forced to live in freezing weather, driving rain, and the relentless sun. Amish breeders typically maintain dogs in groups as small as 10 to over 1,000, far more than they can actually take care of. And when their breeding days are over, when they're broken and can no longer function as baby machines, their life is over. Now, let's focus on the Appalachian village of Millersburg, Ohio. Population just over 3,000, and ruled over by the mayoral magnificence of Jeff Huebner. This one small town has 6 of the 100 most abusive and worst puppy mill owners in the United States, according to that Humane Society report. Not exactly something that you put on the tourism info. So let's consider each of them individually and what makes them so terrible. First, let's talk about James E. Miller of Elite Puppies. Inspections found that there were multiple issues across 2020, including multiple dogs in need of veterinary care being ignored, including one dog with, quote, discharge and red irritated tissue around his eyes, and at least 3 dogs with pronounced dental disease, and medication being used in that farm, in that mill, that was, quote, not consistent with the state and federal law. Then there's Joseph A. Miller at Horseshoe Kennel in Millersburg. This particular Miller admitted that a dog had died in his puppy mill due to a so-called do-it-yourself dental procedure not involving a trained veterinarian. This particular miller also failed state inspections and one federal inspection, all in 2020, where he was cited for inadequate veterinary care, and yet is still in operation. Speaking of people who like to pretend to be veterinarians, let's turn to Joseph D. Miller. He failed a state inspection for illegal surgery that he performed on a dog while not being a veterinarian. Inspectors found another dog with an injured leg that was going untreated, and they found that Miller did not provide appropriate housing for his many dogs. Let's take a look at Andy E. Yoder of the Back Road Kennel. State inspectors found a dog covered in scabs and two others in desperate need of medical care in September 2020. This breeder has a history of injured dogs, including issues that go all the way back to 2014, when federal USDA inspectors found a dog with a collar embedded into its skin and 7 dead puppies. Despite being a repeat offender, Yoder is able to stay open. Then we have Jonathan J. Yoder. These things seem to run in the family, don't they? In 2020, inspectors found an underweight mother dog being forced to nurse her children in dangerous flooring where the dogs were being kept. They also found that the facility lacked sufficient records on how they obtained a number of their dogs, which unfortunately usually means that the puppy mill was getting their dogs from unlicensed sources. That is, places that don't get inspected, which creates an environment ripe for abuse. Our final contestant from this minor metropolis of canine abuse is David J. Yutzi. Here, inspectors found several dogs with eye disorders, including one whose eyes were partially protruding with tissue, while the eyes of several others were clouded over. And another dog had severe dental issues. This kennel was well known for doing everything possible to avoid inspectors, including finally being labeled as fully non-compliant. It had 16 different violations, including fecal waste that was not being removed in or from under some of the enclosures on a daily basis, and dogs in cages which were stacked poorly or lacked a solid resting surface, which meant that those dogs could at any time tumble and not just hurt themselves, but perhaps kill themselves. Finally, the shelters at this location did not provide enough room for every dog and puppy to get out of the sun, wind, or rain. Millersburg, Ohio is only about 2 hours away from our studios and a little southwest of Canton, Ohio. My family and I have gone frequently to Amish country in Ohio to buy all sorts of foodstuffs and homemade crafts, not to mention stopping to eat at some wonderful Amish-staffed restaurants. But this report has made us think about the dark things that can be overlooked when you're only seeing and only focused on the intentionally crafted exterior of skill and quaintness that hides some pretty nasty practices. There's an old joke about the futility of attacking the Amish society on a broadcast or streaming channel, namely that they'll never see it coming. But not only is that not true, it's irrelevant. This isn't so much about the Amish or their similar co-religionists. It's about the people, like me and probably you, who support them through commerce and retail sales. We can stop supporting them anytime we want to. There are plenty of gourmet, small batch, and local purveyors of food and crafts that don't support abusive practices like puppy mills. The Amish don't have to see this. They just have to feel the effects of customers refusing to participate or fund the worst part of their enterprise. So I simply urge you to think before you buy next time and to give some care where your money is going. Now, please join us for my incredible interview with Stephen Smith, co-chair of West Virginia Can't Wait. Mr. Smith, thank you so much for being on the show this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We look forward to it all week. So you ran a really energetic and engaged, people-focused campaign for the Democratic nomination for governor in the state of West Virginia. Yet the party rank and file chose to go with someone who, from my point of view, their main qualification was an endorsement from Joe Manchin, the former governor and current senator from West Virginia. So why do you think that happened, and how can we revive progressive politics in Appalachia?
It's a great question. And there's a few answers, right? One of them is this is a fight that's 150 years long, right? We aren't going to win it in one election cycle or even a couple of years or a couple of election cycles. It's going to take a generation of organizing. And so that's one thing to remember is we like a quick response. We like immediate gratification, and the kind of work we're engaging in is generational. And so we have to be ready to keep fighting, even if we lose here or there. It's another reason why in that campaign, as you'll remember, we define success not just by getting one guy into office, because we knew that one guy wasn't going to make the difference. We spent 2 years recruiting, training, supporting 101 candidates for office up and down the ballot, people who are normally excluded from the political process, putting their names on the ballot. And we now have 15 of those people in office governing in a way that isn't the good old boy Democrat way or the good old boy Republican way. And so we actually saw the 2020 election as a huge success. And that gets to your question of how we measure success and what we're after. If all we're trying to do is elect one more guy or change one more seat, then we're going to lose a lot. It's going to be frustrating. If our goal is to actually change our state for our kids and grandkids, then we've got to take the long view and work to replace not just one person or a handful of people or politicians, but to replace the political machine that serves those at the very top with a political machine that serves everybody else. And that's what we're all about. That's what our organization and movement, West Virginia Can't Wait, has been doing since the beginning.
You're right. And there were some great progressive victories in West Virginia that did even get press outside the state. I'm thinking particularly of folks like Rosemary Ketchum in Wheeling, who, to my knowledge, is the first openly transgendered elected official in the state of West Virginia, which is absolutely fantastic. So there were a lot of victories for progressives in Virginia, West Virginia, and the rest of Appalachia. So you're right. I believe there was a lot of positive there. So
yeah, and just to follow up on that, you used the word progressive. I've actually, I think, less and less using that word because it reinforces the idea that somehow the fight in West Virginia is the left versus the right.
Okay.
And what we're offering isn't really a challenge from the left. It's one of the criticisms that gets thrown at our work. And if we were just trying to replace one ideology with another, that's not really what we're after. It's not a challenge from the left. It's a challenge from the bottom. It's
right.
a challenge from the people that a lot of the work we have to do is not really the work of going out and trying to wag our fingers and convince West Virginia voters to agree with us. Our work instead, we believe, is to go to West Virginia voters and listen to them and say, as minors, what do you need? As veterans, what do you need? As seniors, as people of color, as ex-offenders, as people who are houseless. And we want to build a government that answers to people where they're at, rather than tries to convince people that a particular ideology or a particular party is the answer. I hope that makes sense.
It does.
It's one of the things that's sort of central to what we do.
Sure, and it flows into my next question, and I completely agree with you especially from a philosophical point of view. I would argue that anything that rises to the level of an ideology is a giant red flag, no pun intended, because ideologies beg you to have your judgment replaced by a Cant or orthodoxy or whatever the term is. So I think you're right about that, very much so. So given that point of view and the fact that there's, whether you're left or right or Democrat or Republican, that comes from those sides and that system. So you're the chair of the organization co-chair of the organization West Virginia Can't Wait, that gets at a lot of those issues. Can you tell us and our viewers what the goals and values of that organization are, and how can people get involved?
Thanks for that question. West Virginia Can't Wait is a movement to build a people's government in West Virginia. Just to the point we were making, the thing we believe is that no one person or ideology has all of the answers, but the people do. And that's what West Virginia Can't Wait is all about. So there's three ways that we try to win a people's government. One is that we recruit and train and support people at election time, and even leading up to election time. We're out to get people to run for office. People who are pro-labor, no corporate cash, and are willing to do the work of listening to their constituents. So if that's you and you're watching this, we want to help. There may not be a machine for you on the left or the right, the Democrats or the Republicans, but we want to be that machine. You can call me. This is my cell phone, Anthony, 304-610-6512. If you want to run for office, or if there's a friend who wants to run, we'll help. So that's the first thing. We contest for power in elections. The second thing we do is we help those people, once they get into office, be able to govern, so they don't get swallowed up by the lobbyists and the party machines and everything else. And then the last thing we do is we support the people who are doing the work that government ought to be doing, whether that's volunteer fire departments or harm reduction organizations or recovery houses or emergency response groups. Throughout West Virginia, we've got people helping their neighbors one-on-one, town by town. And we think that work is part of how we govern. How do we fill the gaps of what government ought to be doing? So we offer training, and we're going to start offering funding and other support to groups like that.
Great, wonderful. And I think that's really one of the unique things about that organization, is that its goal is not to necessarily elect a particular person or what have you, that its goal is not just bottom up, but to actively engage in creating a better space, a better community for all of us. And
we say one way we say it is we don't aim to persuade those in power. We aim to replace them. And I think that really gets to the heart of what we're all about.
And I must say that's aggressive in the best sense of the word. I'm very happy to hear that. So speaking of West Virginia Can't Wait, recently the organization has begun a movement to replace Joe Manchin. In fact, I believe the website is replacejoemanchin.com as West Virginia senator, and really to replace him as the Democratic kingmaker in the state. There's very little that can happen in the basic machinery of the Democratic Party in the state without his approval, it seems. Can you tell us why you think Joe Manchin needs to be replaced?
Sure. And this is the website is new, replacejoemanchin.com, but the idea isn't. From the very beginning of the campaign, we said, look, we know whose side we're on and we know whose side we're against. And we're fighting against the wealthy good old boys club that's been running West Virginia politics for 150 years. And sometimes they call themselves Democrats, sometimes they call themselves Republicans, but we aren't interested in supporting anybody who's beholden to corporate interests and out-of-state big money and bankers and financiers. And that's Senator Manchin, that's his machine, and he's not alone. We are equally as interested in replacing the current Republican machine in this state. And a growing majority of West Virginians are with us, fed up with both parties and looking for a political force, a political home that welcomes working class people more than it welcomes out-of-state bankers and fossil fuel executives. So if you go to the website, you can learn more about what we do. You can make a donation to support that day-to-day grassroots work of building a machine on the side of the people to replace the Manchin machine and the Republican machine in West Virginia. You can also, in addition to that donation, you can also use the website to nominate someone to run for office. Because again, in order to replace that machine, we need people running up and down the ballot. So you can go on that website. Maybe you want to nominate yourself to run for office. Maybe you have a friend or family member. Maybe there's someone you've seen in your community. And we will personally follow up and offer that person support of the campaign, because it's not easy going against the powers that be, and for us to have any shot, we've got to be ready to work together.
Absolutely, and that of course leads to my next question. What makes someone? You talked about pledging not to take corporate money, and those types of issues, but when it comes to candidate personality or charisma, or what makes a person, what makes a good candidate for this type of message?
What a great question. I don't know that I've ever been asked that question that way. I think the most valuable skill a candidate can have, certainly more than public speaking or charisma, is the willingness to work their asses off, meeting with and listening to and encouraging their neighbors to take action. That, again, when we're up against big money, the thing we can do to have a shot is to bring more people to the table. And so if you're thinking about running for office, I think the way to think about it is, do you have 20, 30, 40 hours a week to be out knocking on doors, to be out meeting in town halls, to be out grabbing coffee and a drink with a friend, a neighbor, and just person by person, voter by voter, not giving speeches, but listening and trying to encourage that person to get involved as well. That work of organizing, that old-fashioned work of organizing, is everything. And if you're willing to do it, you'll have a shot. And if that sounds overwhelmingly scary, then maybe that's not the right route for you, or let us know and we'll help train you how to do it too.
And organizations like that need a lot of foot soldiers and technicians and people just willing to do whatever needs to be done. So there's lots of ways to be involved. In addition to,
I'll say this, Anthony. Thank you for saying that. I've met literally thousands of fellow West Virginians over the last couple of years, and I have yet to meet a single one that I believe did not have some place in this movement. So no matter who you are, no matter what your skill set, no matter what challenges you're up against, there's a place for you in this movement as long as you're willing to work with people who are different from you and you're willing to do the work. And if you're not sure where you fit, that's just fine. Get in touch and we will figure it out. I mentioned my phone number earlier. My email is steven@wvcantwait.com. Send me a note. We'll find a time to hop on the phone and we'll find a spot for you.
Great. We'll post that as well. So one final question that I have to ask. Are you going to run against Joe Manchin for senator?
The honest answer is I don't think so. We now have a bench of 110 candidates. I think the chances that I'm the right person to run for Senate in 2024 are really, really slim. Okay. The way we'll make that decision is the way we make all decisions. So we've got a team of folks who are already starting to do one-on-one conversations and surveys and talk to each other about not just the 2024 election, but the 2022 election, and really scan all the races and all the candidates and decide who fits best where. I'm pretty sure that the best place for me, at least for the near future, is in this organizing role, supporting other candidates, working on some of our mutual aid work to support those volunteer fire departments, recovery houses. That's where I feel is my spot right now. And down the road, who knows, but I think it's unlikely. Thanks for asking, though.
Absolutely. myself and a lot of people I know very well, you're one Mr. Smith we'd very much like to see in Washington or Charleston or a number of other places, but we certainly understand where you're coming from. So I just want to thank you so very much. This was your incredible interview, and we're very honored to have you here. And we really hope that the message and the mission of West Virginia Can't Wait continues to get out there and continues to grow. So thank you very much.
No, thank you for everybody who's watching. Appalachian channel, follow and like. This is an exciting project, Anthony, and we're all for people out there creating their own media. It's one of the ways that we try to win a government and a state that works for all of us, is to have a media that's not bought and paid for. So thanks for what you're doing, and I hope folks continue to follow, and your trajectory just keeps going up and up and up. It's an exciting project.
Well, thank you very much and have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.